This is our opportunity that we get to start with Happy Holidays!
Yay!
Thank you everyone for coming out, Refinery29 team members, and all of our special guests. My name is Steve Goss. I'm an event producer here at Refinery29, and I've had so much fun putting this together with a variety of teams that are involved with this very special afternoon. We got this up and running pretty fast, and today's going to be very, very special. So today we'll be discussing the intersection between social media and mental health and how we can shed some light on the topic. I'd like to introduce you to our esteemed panel. Actor and advocate, please welcome Chyler Leigh. Welcome, Chyler.
Thank you. Thank you.
Chief Medical Officer for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, welcome Dr. Christine Moutier. Mental health activist, welcome Elise Fox. Head of Global Policy Programs Instagram, welcome Carolyn Merrill. Wellness entrepreneur and digital creator and certified trainer and nutritional coach, welcome Mina Lee. Today's conversation will be moderated by Refinery29's Health and Wellness Director, Ms. Sade Strelke.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
All right, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have each of you here. I guess I will just go ahead and jump in. For this question's for all of you, what role do you think social media plays in mental health today, especially among young people? Do you think it's more helpful or harmful? Start with you, Chyler.
I think it could be a balance of both. I've personally seen both sides of it, where if used, I don't want to say inappropriately, but used in a way that isn't really well thought out or well thought of, I feel like it can actually do a lot of damage if we're not very careful about the words that we use. But at the same time, I've seen such amazing growth and community and support through social media that it's been pretty inspiring to see that, and a relief in a lot of ways.
Christine?
Yeah, I can chime in. You know, social media there's a lot of research now on the impact of social media utilization, and while a lot of the concerns about negative impacts on self-esteem, fear of missing out, anxiety, depression, at the same time, the culture is changing around mental health, and it's a real platform to elevate that conversation in very positive ways. I'm super excited to get to talk today about how we can make sure that the way we communicate on social media is contributing to that and encouraging others.
Absolutely.
I think both. It's definitely a tool to be able to access people you wouldn't necessarily have the access to outside of the app, but it is also like a responsibility, like anything else you put out into the world. You have to really think about what you're putting out and also what you're receiving. So it's kind of the way that you curate it and the way that you accept it. You always have to be thinking about it, and I think that's something that we aren't taught and we aren't really, paying attention to. So it's a bit of both.
I would say it's all about the intention that you put behind it, that it is a tool, it's not good or bad. And I think that, we see incredible things happen on Instagram of sharing silly things to connecting around real shared interests and actually finding help there of having a place to share what you're going through. But we also know it's super complex and that it's always evolving, and so it's something that we really put a lot of priority of understanding.
Yeah, I think that social media is an extremely powerful tool, and it can be used for both good and for not so good. So I think that it's definitely our own personal responsibility as well to set those boundaries in terms of how we choose to engage with it, what we put out, as well as what we choose to receive in.
Absolutely. And on that note, Chyler, how do you think it helps when celebrities and influencers openly talk about their diagnoses or that they're living with a mental health condition, whether it be in the press or social media? Obviously, I think you have something pretty big to share with us today.
Yeah, well, yesterday was the first time that I actually spoke openly about having bipolar disorder. and something that's terrified me for a long time because it feels like I'm admitting some sort of secret or some sort of, you know, way that people are going to look at me differently or judge me, and I've been met with nothing but acceptance and love and support, which is just amazing. But I think, you know, we have an incredible opportunity. People that are celebrities and in the public eye like that have an incredible opportunity to use that platform, and like we were just talking about, to be able to use it for good and to be able to show people and let people see and understand that you're not alone. You're not the only one that's going through what you're going through, and there's so many great resources and so much community that you can talk to and learn more about in order to just be educated, but be comforted, and to feel like you're heard and that you matter right exactly where you are. It's not a level of, you know, you're living to some sort of expectation other than just being you.
Absolutely. Caroline, just to go off that really quickly, what effect do you notice on Instagram when celebrities or influencers talk openly about any struggles that they might be going through?
I think it's incredible. I think that young people really look up to public figures, and so to be that brave and put yourself out there is really something admirable. And I think it's also something, you know, we spend a lot of time researching, and I think that younger people sometimes have a harder time being more open and honest just in that public space because they haven't built up that muscle yet. And so I think that it's really wonderful for public figures to be able to show that that's possible. Obviously, for young people needing to know, like, maybe be careful where you're putting that, and maybe share some of that first in close friend circles because you don't have that muscle exercised enough yet.
Absolutely. Chyler, so social media has proven to be a big part of the mental health journeys we see on this panel today. Where these two important topics intersect, what does it mean to you to take a mindful approach to safe and supportive storytelling, sort of going off what Caroline was just saying?
I think, you know, the power of our words is tremendous in one way or another. It can build people up or tear people down in a single tweet, in a single hashtag, in anything. And I feel like, you know, to make sure that we understand that dialogue and how to speak directly to people in a positive way, in an encouraging way, sometimes without shoving it down people's throats. I feel sometimes it can be off-putting when you approach without really being mindful and delicate with it. And just people that I've come across in person, from even just Comic-Cons or meeting people, you know, at shows, and watching those that have come up to me and said, you know, I saw this post that you made. I've got so many responses from people that I've watched along the way and watched their growth, and yesterday just saying, oh my gosh, I'm so proud of you for sharing your story, or oh my gosh, that's exactly where I'm at. This encourages me to step out and maybe go find help. And I felt yesterday, one thing that I really wanted to reiterate is that not everybody's story or journey is exactly the same. It's a different face for everybody. And yes, I have a platform and I'm incredibly grateful for that, but I mean, just telling one person, talking to one person that you trust, and even if it's a matter of, you know, if it's a crisis moment, there's so many resources, as you would know very well, that you can utilize. It just starts with you having that conversation with yourself, and then it's just step by step. It's one at a time, and I've been watching some pretty amazing journeys.
Absolutely. Elise, do you want to chime in on safe storytelling?
Yes, so our platform, Sad Girls Club, is essentially a safe space for millennials and Gen Z to speak out about their mental wellness and to also find community around something that's so stigmatized and something that really affects our community is cultural differences, like just go to church and pray and you'll feel better. So it's also giving them that space and that access to, you know, to hear and to be involved with others that look like them, that are from similar backgrounds, and it can establish that relatability. I think for me, before I started Sad Girls Club, I was in my 20s and still didn't know what depression actually looked like, what anxiety felt like, and I can only imagine how hard it is for a younger generation. So we really try to just make our content as accessible and as digestible. And we use a lot of memes. We kind of like lighten it up. We do it comically, we do it delicately, but we kind of just make it for all women and all girls to find a space. And if you don't like one post, or if one post doesn't resonate with you, we try our best to make sure that the next post will, and our live streams will. And it's a constant conversation that we are always evolving every single week.
Absolutely. And Christine, do you want to speak a little bit about how the type of language we can use and the methods we can use to make sure that when we are telling our own stories or sharing other stories, that we're doing it in a safe and respectful way?
Definitely. And I actually wanted to say even first that when somebody starts sharing on social media or in person about things they're going through, and particularly about mental health, always remember that they may be sharing in a way that feels like they're taking a risk. And they may be kind of putting a little bit of information out there to see if you are a safe and trustworthy resource. And so, I think if you have that compassion in you, you don't have to have all the knowledge in the world. All you have to do is say, thank you so much for sharing that with me. I want to learn more about what it is that you experience and how that is for you. So just, a little bit on that in terms of absolutely the encouragement, but always remember that people are taking a risk by sharing, and we can not take that for granted. When it comes to yourself and telling your own story, I would, number one, try to make sure that you're in a place where you are ready to do that emotionally. It will have potentially ramifications that are hopefully, for the vast majority, very positive and encouraging that come back to you, but there will be other messages out there. And so be aware that I would start out by telling your story, like you said, with very safe people in your life, so that you can develop your own language for what it is you experience, whether it's depression or anxiety or an eating disorder or addiction. When we're telling our stories, also, especially in a public way, be aware that the pain is real and very important to share, but the whole journey is very important to share, and that messages of hope will inspire others to actually get help and stop keeping the secret of what they experience. And then just in terms of language, the most important thing when you're sharing your own experiences related to suicide are to be very careful about sharing safely, which for suicide means avoiding the potential that you glorify the issue, the struggle, and particularly the behaviors. And so we don't recommend sharing the actual method if you have attempted. You can talk about it in terms of a suicide attempt that you had on your own life without having to go into any graphic detail about that. And the last thing I'll say about language is, we've learned so much through science and through advocates that the phrase commit suicide simply does not make sense. We use that phrase commit when it is about a morally reprehensible act, crime, and these are issues of health and human experiences. There's no judgment in that. And so we really would recommend to try to root that phrase commit suicide out of your vocabulary. Very excited that the Associated Press made that official recommendation in their style book to journalists not to use that phrase, and just plain language, died by suicide, took his life, ended her life, and attempts. So that's important.
Right. And just going off of that, how do you think we as individuals can be good allies to people who want to share their mental health journeys? How can we let them know that they're not alone, and also help them get the resources that they might need? For you, Christine.
Well, look, there are these incredible communities that are in formation as the culture is changing. We've seen things in the suicide prevention world that are really exciting. So one example of that is, it used to be the case that people who were suicide loss survivors were really the sole bearers carrying the flag to change the world around suicide prevention. And as stigma is going down, people with their own lived experience, that's probably the majority of us in the room, because we all have our own mental health experiences. But in the suicide prevention space, lived experience means people who've had their own attempt and survived it, or who have struggled with a mental health condition or having been suicidal. So, I would just say, please know, if wherever you are in your journey, that there is a community, and probably communities, waiting for you. And we are inviting, we are encouraging, and you're simply not alone. And you might wonder, why is that important to connect to others? And there is such a power in sharing your own burdens, being inspired by others, and also we learn from each other constantly about how to manage our own mental health.
Chyler, do you have anything to add to that? I know you said that you were scared to share your story initially, but was there anyone or any platforms or anything that you saw change in the culture that made you feel more safe?
Well, yesterday, by the end of the night, each interview that I was doing throughout the day yesterday, it kind of felt like a little bit more and more was being lifted off my shoulders, which I come from a history, like family history of bipolar disorder, and I mean, I've been suicidal, I've kind of been in a lot of very dark areas in my own life. And I think the thing that impacted me the most yesterday was the response from friends and family, some of which I'd never even spoken to about, you know, living with bipolar disorder. And then seeing, DMs in Twitter and seeing the comments on Instagram and seeing the posts all over the place. And it was just one of those moments where you go, gosh, the words that we use, sharing our story, if it's this tiny or it's, you know, the whole thing, it's incredibly impactful. And again, it's like it can be at whatever degree that it is for you that's most comfortable. But again, like we have such a great panel up here right now with so many different ways to express that and to find ways to live and enjoy your life, and that it is possible.
Absolutely. Mina, Elise, do you want to chime in on this topic of what you've seen others, both different platforms, people in your personal life and social media, and how they've helped you feel comfortable sharing your own journeys?
Yeah, when I began speaking about my mental illnesses, I could not even fathom speaking about it verbally. I did it through a documentary film that I shot about my experiences, and I released it, and I was still terrified about the reception and the response and what my family would think, and people would just write me off and think that I'm crazy. But similar to you, I just received love, and it showed that there is power in our words, and there is power in language, and there is power in vulnerability. And from then, I really saw that I can either like complain or create, and I wanted to just create something that was everlasting and that can be here and can be something that young girls can look up to. So even if you think your story is so small, your experience is just yours, you never know who you're gonna impact by just putting it out there in a way that feels great for you.
For me, as a coach and trainer, I initially, kept that pretty strict boundary of sharing my personal story with my clients because, that experience is about them and me helping them. But as I started to tell them that I experienced a variety of things, everything from my competitive skating career to my eating disorder afterwards, all of a sudden it made me this more relatable coach, and it made me a better coach in being able to let them know that they weren't there alone, that I wasn't speaking from some sort of platform of not understanding what that struggle is like. Just because I'm the one with knowledge to help them, it didn't mean that I am perfect.
Carolyn, we know that online bullying, especially among young people, is a major source of mental stress, and that Instagram has been heavily focused on providing resources for this issue, thinking about the Real Convo campaign and others like it, testing the removal of likes, which some people liked and some didn't. How does Instagram intend to continue the work of creating safe spaces online, and is it a goal of the company to sort of be a leader in this space?
So Instagram wants to lead the fight against online bullying, which I'm really proud of, and it's something that the company from the top down cares so deeply about and has put so many resources with its product, with the policy teams, with the whole teams just focusing on this. So this is something that we really take seriously. What's coming out or what's recent, something I'm really excited about is a feature called Restrict, which is something that we heard from directly talking to young people, because as we know, bullying is complex and it's evolving. And as new products come out, teens figure out different ways to use that. And so what we heard from them is that the blocking feature was a little bit too harsh for them, because think about it, if you're in school and you're having to see these people day in and day out, that's a little too harsh that they know, wow, you blocked me. So we came up with a different feature called Restrict. So it's a more lightweight version of blocking, so the person doesn't know that you have blocked them. You can still see what's going on, but you have more control. So you can see the post before they post it, or only you can see it until you approve it. And so that's just one thing. Real Convo, we worked actually with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention on last May. Elise was one of the people featured as well, and it was a campaign all about just making that conversation easier, so it doesn't have to be this high stakes of, oh my goodness, I don't know what to say, if my friend's not doing well. So really featuring different people like Elise, showing how they are using their own platform to just make it a less stressful conversation of how you can just reach out.
Absolutely. And Chyler, I know you mentioned you have a 16-year-old. Can you share a little bit, if you know, how you sort of help guide him through using social media, or sort of set boundaries around it?
I will be very honest. I have 3 children. I have 2 girls, 10 and 13, and my son is 16, and not one of them have social media.
Wow.
That is something that I've been terrified of, because I have seen how it's been abused, and I've seen, the impact in my household. We've got bipolar disorder, autism spectrum disorder, you've got ADHD, we've got depression, anxiety, epilepsy. I love to say this, and I get worried that it might be taken out of context, but I think it's hilarious. We're just chock full of nuts, like we just really are. Like under one roof, we are an incredibly dynamic, creative family, but we're also incredibly sensitive. And I myself stepped back from social media for quite a bit, because I've seen the impacts, and I've seen even the things that I've said when everything that I meant was genuine and vulnerable, and to be encouraging and uplifting, and to see the words turned against me and taken out of context. I've seen what that can do, and it also was very disheartening to me, and it caused me to not want to talk as much, because I was afraid that people were going to take it the wrong way, or people I didn't want to cause a war within different communities that are followers. And with my kids, they're incredibly sensitive creatures, and they want to help and save everybody, which is a wonderful thing and a very dangerous thing as well. So that's kind of something that I'm eventually going to do. It's because I'm just a worrywart, I think, for myself. I'm very, very closed, and I want to protect my kids. We live in kind of a smaller community, and some of them know, oh, your mom was on this show, oh, your mom was on that show, can we take pictures together? I'm like, like, no. So we try to limit, at least for now. No offense at all.
Not at all. I mean, there's so many different areas or perspectives on parenting. We totally want to give that control to parents. There is a parents guide available for educators and parents, if that's something that you want. It has the different whole conversation starters that we work with a parenting expert that's available on Instagram.
Christine, do you have anything to add about teenagers being on Instagram or other social media platforms?
Yes. Well, so I have a 20-year-old and an 18-year-old, and honestly, they teach me more. They are my Instagram coaches. But no, I when you live with people, you learn about what it's like and what goes on in terms of how people post. And I think one way to look at it is, we are who we are, we communicate the way we do, we interact in the world, and social media is a vehicle, is a platform for how we do that. Now, it might shape the dynamic to go in particular directions, and I think that's where we want to be just more cautious about what we post. If you're trying to be light and humorous, but somebody takes it as mocking on them, that's obviously unintended, but things like that can happen all the time. And so, I think we have to learn how we tick as individuals, all of us in our journey. That's part of our work, that we weren't taught that in our homes and school. How do we keep our resilience optimized? How do we fill that up? How do we avoid the triggers that tend to be the biggest pitfalls that will lead to the same patterns of distress? We can learn that about ourselves. And so social media fits in there with all of that, where we can learn how to use it for our good, and try to encourage others at the same time while kind of diminishing any potential negative or toxic effects.
Right. So I want to go back a second to what's missing in regards to discussions around mental health, both online and offline. And a common barrier to having these open conversations is stigma. And stigma in certain communities, but stigma overall against mental health issues. How do each of you think we can combat these stigmas surrounding mental health? I'll start with you, Mina.
For me, coming from a wellness perspective, because that's a large area of what I focus on in social media, there are definitely stigmas in terms of being open around mental health and people expressing that they have anxiety disorders or depression. But then coming from the wellness lens, there can sometimes also be judgment on relying on Western medication for depression and things like that. And I think coming from that lens, people tend to think that there's one way to attend to your mental health and that everyone's journey who has depression, everyone's journey who has anxiety should look the same or should follow the same kind of protocol. And I think that in the realm of social media, it's definitely helpful to be open and listen to each other's experiences, learn from them, and know that there's not necessarily a correct way of doing that.
So we actually just launched a campaign called The Pressure to Be Perfect, because this is something that we really did just want to call on its head and acknowledge that not just young people, but I think all of us at one time or another can feel a certain pressure to present something. And so we launched a toolkit with the Jed Foundation, and that's something that we're distributing to schools throughout the US and then globally. And I think that that's something that's just, if you feel comfortable talking about that and maybe not always just posting the highlights, but showing maybe the kind of the full story behind it. I think sometimes that, and it doesn't have to be so serious. It doesn't have to be, wow, I'm having a terrible day today, but it can maybe just be like, oh, here's the perfect picture, and also here's all the things behind that. I think that just kind of being honest in the places where you feel safe to do that.
For me, I think representation definitely matters. Just seeing a rainbow of people or individuals in different age ranges speak out about their experiences is something that's very powerful. But I understand that it's also like super, super hard. And I had a shoot last week, and it was for a Sad Girls Club, and there were about 8 or 9 sad girls there. And the photographer asks, like, how do you all know each other? And I'm like, we're all sad, like, we have mental illnesses. And he was like, so, like, I don't know what to ask next. But I'm like, it's okay, like, this is where, we all have our things going on, this is how we know each other, and what's your next question, you know what I mean? Like, just kind of normalizing it. You don't have to, get quiet or scared to ask a follow-up question. Like, this is how we normalize the conversation, so you just represent, be yourself.
I feel like people understand now more than ever that mental health is part of health. So just like physical health, it's going to be different for different people. The way it manifests, the way we manage it, the treatment plans, all of that will have slight unique variations depending on the person. But it's also a time when authenticity and #RealConvo are absolutely being embraced and celebrated. We want nothing more than to have deep, real conversations and real relationships in our lives where we feel like people have our back and we don't have to keep secrets. That's something I think is just in our human soul. And so this merges together beautifully where we can have these real, authentic conversations about what it is we go through, whether it's mental health, whether it's family stuff, whether it's, anything. And again, learn from all of it, learn how to grow and improve ourselves. Try not to fall into the same pitfalls. When we really get analytical about it, you can look back and you can see those patterns in your life. And that's what therapy does help us so much with. It's hard to be objective about ourselves.
Right.
I'm in the thick of all of it right now, with 16, 13, and 10. This is a conversation that is very much, a part of our family and in our household, just under our roof. It's like change the world. You want to start with your family first. It's the people that are closest to you. And so all of these conversations, and we were just talking about this, having teenagers or having, people in your life that are really close to you, when I can sit and have these conversations and encourage all these people and have these powerful things to say, and try to give resources and just listen. I find myself having the hardest time doing so in my own house because I don't know, sometimes it's so close. And if my son is struggling with something or my daughter is struggling, either one are struggling, I find myself just going, I love you. And you know, my 10-year-old, you know, I'm trying to encourage her because she's on a very emotional journey right now, and ups and downs, and dealing with a lot. And you know, at 10, you look at it and you just go, you know, your heart breaks. And she was just crying and inconsolable, and I kept looking at her and I was like, Annie, you're okay, like you're okay, because I wanted to fix it so badly that I kind of took that away from her. And she looked at me and she's like, no, Mommy, I'm not okay. And I was floored. I just looked at her and I was like, you know what? You're absolutely right, and that's okay. And that's the kind of conversation that we're having, and I'm finding is so important to have, that sometimes it's just a matter of listening. Like, I need to just be quiet sometimes and just listen. And in all the times that I grew up and I was told it wasn't okay to talk about how I felt, it was not okay. I had to be that picture perfect, you know, in the house, because I had to, you know, I get handed the reins when I was 12, and I look at my girls and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're right there. But listening is so incredibly important. You don't always have to have the right answer. You don't always have to know exactly what to say. Sometimes, like you're saying, it's just, I hear you, I see you, let's do this together at your own pace. Just know that I'll be here and help however I can.
And on that note, can each of you share a sort of a concrete tip or piece of advice that can help move the needle on making online spaces more welcoming, tolerant, and safe, and even offline spaces for people living with mental health conditions, diagnosed or undiagnosed?
Yeah, I think...
The last one you shared was pretty good, by the way.
I know, I'm trying to think, okay, what else can I say? I think taking away expectations that you have to live up to some sort of standard, you know, I think is so important for all of us to really work on. Like, I know for myself, even posting pictures, sometimes I'm like, ooh, that's a really vulnerable one, and I know there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on that. And I go, okay, I'm leaving the house without my eyebrows on. What if someone sees me? Like, my children stole them from me, so it's fine, I'm not bitter. But there is that sense of wanting to be what everybody expects you to be. And I think, you know, really giving yourself the room and the grace to understand that that's just not possible. And that's okay that it's not possible, and it doesn't have to be. And people, you know, you're not defined by a diagnosis. Just because there's a name for it, you know, that's a starting point. It doesn't mean that that's like your sentence. That's not what now all of a sudden, oh, I have bipolar disorder and this is what I expect for the rest of my life. It's not how it is. When you have great support and people that, you know, you surround yourself with and that are educated, more educated than you or more experienced with you, then, you know, you're in a pretty great position for significant healing and help.
Absolutely. Christine?
Well, sharing your own story certainly is a way to invite others to realize that secret keeping is not necessary. We can be real. We can be part of a trusted community. But I think the more you post messages that are about this message of authenticity and acceptance, really about unconditional love. You know, I'm on your site all the time, and on ours, AFSB National, you'll see all kinds of posts that give this message. And you know, when that goes viral, it does create a community and culture change.
I would say curate the feed that is beneficial to your mental health, and it's like not shady if you don't want to if you want to unfollow someone who makes you feel bad about yourself. It's you or them, and you know, you have to kind of like choose you and your mental wellness, and find a space online where you can actually like detox. Like, I have a Finsta account where I just follow a bunch of vegan recipes that I probably would never try, but I like to follow them. And Larice right here, she also has a really good page that helps me speak in a corporate language. Like, this is a good way to say this. This is not a good way to say this. So I'm constantly just educating myself online as well. And kind of like, I live like MySpace. Like, back in the day when we had MySpaces, probably not a lot of you, you would just post a photo, and the first photo you took, you posted it, and it was like, there it is. Like, I look a mess, but it's out there. And I don't think we do that anymore. Everything is so perfect. So I think just think the way you used to think when you use MySpace. It's been helpful for me.
Amazing. I'm gonna go back and tell our founder, like, we need to think with the MySpace brain. I would say follow people who maybe you don't understand what they're going through. So maybe if you don't have bipolar disorder, but you want to understand maybe more about that. For me, I follow this girl, Ellie Wheeler, and she's in a wheelchair, and she's differently able than I am. But watching her Instagram has helped me see what it's like a little bit to be in her life, and just even from traveling on an airplane, like, whoa, what does that look like? Or like, I will never use the handicap bathroom again, because you hear from her of like what that struggle is like. And so I would say to destigmatize it and to make it safer, just try to, I think Instagram's a great place for that, because you can just see another person's perspective.
Leapfrogging off of that, it's familiarizing yourself with the communities, I think, and life experiences that you're not accustomed to in your own circles or whatever privilege you may have. I think that's super important, and a platform that I love is Humans of New York, because they, in a very unbiased way, tell these stories, these very human stories of people going through similar things but in very different scenarios. And I think what we can do best is just ask questions, even if you don't know how to support that person, or if you don't know how to respond to something that's like, you know, as you're saying, your photographer was like, oh, what do I say next? You know, say, I don't know what to say here, but I support you, and just express that good intent, and use that as a learning experience so that you're better with it the next time.
Last question before we take questions from the audience. Are there any communities or handles or people that you guys love following on social media, whether it be for mental health or politics or social issues, just a group of people or a platform that you guys think is like really making a difference? We'll start with you, Mina.
Honestly, it's Humans of New York, actually. That just, but just like the diverse amount of accounts that's also spurred on. There are so many international mini communities of that as well. And I just love seeing stories from around the world from people who are completely different to the way I live my life.
I love this girl, her name is the Black Swan Diaries. And her account is really awesome because she's a professional dancer. She also talks about her experience with anxiety. She's Black, she is a queer person of faith. So it's like all of this intersection is so interesting to see in one person, but I also think that just shows how we are going and how we're not just defined by one thing, but we are so many different things. So her account's awesome to follow. I also think it's just cool because maybe you came there to follow her for her dance, but you learn a lot about mental health or what it's like to struggle with your faith and your sexuality.
I like Larisse IRL. She's really, really nice. I love her Friday Unbothered as well. Black Girl in Ohm gives a lot of like wellness resources, and it's good to really just see myself represented on the platform. And there's a new mental health platform called Saddies_Baddies. I think they're like super new. I think they just started a couple of weeks ago, but they are a really, really great resource for super, super young women of color as well.
Well, there's so many great ones, but I really do want you all to check out our account, AFSP National. If you haven't checked it out, it's so diverse. Everybody who's involved with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention has been personally touched by suicide, and that can mean so many different things. That's really the majority of us, so please check it out, AFSP National.
I think I might shake things up a little bit. I love animals doing things. Anything cat related, dog related, pet related. There's something that in those moments when I'm kind of off, or I need something to smile about, can always smile about. We're talking about baby goats. You can always, there's nothing to not love.
Big recently.
Pigs too, the pig thing. But that's something I think an example of what makes you happy. Tiny Chef. Oh my gosh, I have no idea what he's saying, but it's hilarious. And on that note, also for myself, following people like Kristen Bell and Jennifer Garner, who are really making such a big difference to me. These are two women that are in the industry that also have children, that are also just, I know with Kristen Bell, she's talked about her own mental health, and you just see these ladies that are just real deal. And for me, that's such an inspiration, because I do think, I have in my own mind, I do have to live up to this expectation, and I have to look a certain way. and that's what makes me great. But I'm looking at these women that are just like, you know what? I'm walking out in my bathrobe to go take my kid to the school bus. I was like, what a great post. And I find that to be brave, and that inspires and encourages me to be brave as well.
Absolutely.
Wait, Sade, who do you like? What pages do you follow?
Oh God, I really like Sad Girls Club. I really like it. And I think, you know, as I don't want to put you on the spot, but I think in the Black community, depression and mental health issues are not spoken about as much. And, you know, if you talk about it, or if you say you want to go see someone, you know, you're kind of called crazy. You know, and I think that is changing. So I really think that, you know, organizations like Sad Girls Club, that are led by women of color, and just, you know, really put it out there that anyone of any race can have an issue like this, it means a lot. It really means a lot.
Thank you.
I would be doing a major disservice if I did not talk about Be Vocal, Speak Up. At bevocal.speakup on Instagram, please check it out, because we get to refer to all these wonderful people up here.
Thank you, everyone. I guess now we'll take questions from the audience for a few minutes. Yes.
You said that you don't allow your children to be on social right now. Does that cause them to have like a different type of bullying in some ways, or to feel like left out or left behind? I'm just curious.
That's a great question. Thankfully, no. I know it's not the case with everybody, but because of what I do, I just have always been extra protective. But I've also been uneducated. So I didn't know that there were all these great resources and ways that I can talk to them and show them how to use it appropriately. When I see, you know, my son's friends who are using it, and I'm just looking, going, oh my gosh.